So I'm going to attempt to call the meeting to order. It's a few minutes after 10, it's 10:06. And Gabby, if you could call the roll for us, let's see if we have a quorum. Kind of slim pickings here today. I think there's this interesting thing about weather coming up. That's got everybody kind of batting down.
We blew ours away last week. So.
We're a little concerned.
At dispatch.
Gabby's dispatch.
All right, so we have Courtney here, Marty Robinson, Chad Black.
I'm on the phone.
I want to say wrong, we notice.
He's not coming tonight.
Sam Holt,
I'm here.
Morning, Sam.
Lee Oliver,
Here.
Blake Thompson.
Here.
Dwayne Montgomery. David Edwards did say that he was not going to be able to join today. Vic Drawdy,
I'm here.
Huey Atkins. Elizabeth Atkins here.
Oh, Regina.
Regina Medeiros.
Here.
And then Gina Solomon.
Yeah, she's on.
Regina's on.
Yep. Everybody is here. That's Keith. David.
I was just gonna ask, is Marty Robinson on?
Yeah,
Yeah. You are.
we were good. That's great. So we do have a quorum. We can conduct business. I think the first thing on our agenda today is the establishment or the approval of the minutes from the meeting of 10/28/21.
Courtney, I'll make a motion to approve them. I read them earlier.
All right, thank you, Vic. I have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Got a second from Huey. Any discussion? All in favor be aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any opposition? All right, minutes are approved. Georgia Trauma Commission update. Yes?
Thank you. Can you all hear okay? Hear us? We can hear you great, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, super. Thanks, Vic. So a few things to update the group on, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Katie, the illustrious accountant for the commission, to give you some finance updates. A couple projects that we've had in process for a while. We just finished the readiness cost survey for the level 3 and level 4 centers, and I mentioned this back at our November meeting or October, whenever we met last. This is the first time we've attempted to establish what readiness costs are for the rural centers. We have well-documented level 1 and 2 readiness costs, but we don't have it for 3s. Where I think it will help some of you in the rural areas is that we hope this can inform maybe some startup grants to try to entice some other centers potentially in coming on board as trauma centers. So that's the first piece to get that. So we should have all that information aggregated and ready for report by the time we have our winter commission meeting. Courtney, I believe, has a separate March clause update, so I'll let him talk about that later. We are in process. Renee Morgan and I have been talking with the American College of Surgeons about, many of you remember when the commission first started, because some of you have been around for a while. We had an ACS system consult, which we had a number of things to work on. We plan to have that again, but there's some things that have to happen before that. And these are things that I've been talking about every meeting. Now we need that NHTSA EMS assessment. Obviously those got pushed back a little bit because of COVID. So what we're working with ACS on is, could we do a rural focused visit? Because when they come, they can't help but focus on the urban areas because that's where a lot of the calls are run. And I think rural doesn't really get its, a real fair assessments, so, or at least not enough, maybe efforts kind of focused on that. So the intent of the rural focus visit would be that folks would come with specific expertise in rural trauma system planning and kind of take a look at rural as its own sort of subcategory, if you will, of some good feedback on that. So we're working potentially fall of this year to kind of get that going. So we'll keep you up to date on that. The ACS asked Renee and I to put together some questions that we would like answered. So we got the rural leadership group together, and we, Courtney was part of that. We framed some questions and submitted that to them. So more to come on that. We are, thanks to Crystal from Region 5's leadership with Stop the Bleed, we're really ramping up our Stop the Bleed education, which largely many of you had to pause just due to the logistics with COVID. So we are pushing out the training equipment. We actually just signed for North American Rescue to pay for that. All the equipment is here. It's in Forsyth, and Crystal is working with the rest of our tech coordinators to push out that training equipment. And then the other thing to mention is one of the biggest challenges that we're having is besides readiness costs and some of the work that we've done regarding access to trauma system or trauma care, we can tell you what % adults, pediatric patient and elderly patients make it to a trauma center. We can tell you with respect to TBI, severe TBI, what % of patients make it to a trauma center. We can even tell you survivability of those groups. But what we can't tell you is how long it takes for the patients to get to definitive care. And that's been sort of a chronic issue due to the lack of data linkages between EMS data, hospital data, and the like. So we finally, Gina's been working on a group with us, with Renee, Marie, David's in that group, and Jim Dunn heads it. It's our data committee. And we finally got what I think is some of the best data we've actually been able to put together. When it comes from patients who go directly from scene to definitive care, we can tell you about 75% of those patients, how long it takes them to get to definitive care. And we're just looking at a quarter, so I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet, because we only got 1 quarter worth of data. We need much more data. But when it comes to those patients who go somewhere else first and then have to get transferred, we only have about 17% of that data set. So while if you go from scene to definitive care, that 75% is pretty reflective of what's going on in the entire population. When you go somewhere else and you get hung up for whatever reason, they didn't dispo you soon enough, they couldn't access transfer, there was no service that could come get you and take you out. There was no referring, there was a delay in receiving you or getting acceptance at a receiving facility. All those things we have no window in because we just don't have enough information. So there were some promising things in the pipeline, but I'm just here to say, like, those have all kind of gone out the window. So we're really trying to dig deep to figure out how can we sort of solve this data linkage piece. There is some stuff that we're just becoming aware of between electronic medical records, that potentially the trauma center, wherever the patient lands, they can go into the medical record that then can link up to the EMS trip sheet. David Newton had talked about an armband project that sound really promising, but that is a NHTSA grant, and apparently those armbands can only be used for patients in motor vehicle crashes, and there's not enough to go around for all trauma and all patients. So
Can I ask you a quick question?
please.
I just want to make sure, because I at some point I lost track.
Yeah.
So we've got relatively good data from the original 911 call to a non-trauma center.
No, to definitive care, to the trauma center.
Okay, so, okay, but we don't have it if they,
Go somewhere else first.
okay, so if Courtney picks up in their area, somebody picks up and transports to their hospital,
Mhm.
and then that patient ends up being in the ER, because y'all still are a trauma center, right?
We're level 4.
Okay, well, that would be a trauma center.
Is
Is that, are you counting fours?
We are, and we still don't have that linkage.
Okay, so somebody is doubling at 3 now?
Yeah.
Dodge County? Are they for?
There's zero.
Okay, so somebody, EMS picks up
But we
patients.
still don't have that, even though he's a level 4, if he goes from his place to AU, which is a common referral pattern,
Okay.
we still don't have that.
Okay, so,
Mhm.
so the missing link is EMS goes to a non-level 1 or 2. Indirectly.
Care.
Non-definitive care.
Okay, non-definitive care, and then they're in that ER for whatever period of time. You're missing the transfer from that location to definitive care.
And in many cases, we're missing just the ERP, just whatever time they even got to the ERPs, because just go with me here for a minute.
That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
follow the link.
Think, if we have 75% of seen to definitive care,
Right.
when you look at that against all seen to hospital, it's probably pretty close, right? So if we could just get the time that they actually landed at the referring to the time they actually got to the
And it's
definitive care,
is-
1 or 2,
Is
1 or 2.
definitive care in this scenario defined as where they stay admitted?
Yes, and where they got their final treatment and they
Okay,
didn't
so
have
if
to
it's
go
a
anywhere
simple-
else.
Ankle fracture and Courtney's place is able to handle it, that's
Yeah.
definitive care for that patient.
Right,
If it's multi-system trauma and they're going to Savannah or AU or Macon,
yes.
that's not definitive care until they get one of those.
Right, and that patient, because it didn't get transferred, wouldn't even be included in the transfer to definitive care. That subpopulation of patients who arrive somewhere else and cannot get definitive care treatment, then that goes into the pool of patients that have to go somewhere else.
But
Is
a
that not-
caveat of one of the reasons why we have such a low percentage of data is it was not required by the Office of OEMS and T for centers.
And the NTDB actually gave.
What
it
was
up
not
to-
required,
Well, the referring center stuff doesn't go to NTDB.
which is the initial arrival time?
Initial arrival to.
So the information at the referring center that there are places to put in the trauma registry. The final definitive care center can add that information, but it was not required. So since it was not required, the centers, some would do it, I used to do it because it's a great way to keep up with your transfers and you have to PI those, but you weren't required to do it and it didn't get downloaded to the state. So we have added for 2022 data that the centers will need to collect that information. So that should help that percentage go up. But I still think we'll see challenges with the patient comes from, we'll say, Emmanuel to AU, if it doesn't get all the records with those times on it at the final destination, that's going to kind of complicate having that information as well. So we are going to work with the centers on how can we make sure that we get a complete data set, whether it's working with the sending facilities to make sure they send the records, reaching back out if they get what they need to complete that.
Is that on the transfer sheets that the hospitals do?
Yeah, it's not, no, I don't think it's on the transfer sheets, but at least our hospital's on the transfer sheet and, we don't. Good point, because if it's an immediate transfer, they may not get all the records.
Mhm.
So they may fax them or email them later and the two ends may not meet.
I think on our end, got a time we call EMS, time EMS is there in the ER.
So since we're using Courtney's place, if the patient arrives and they're in the ED for 3 hours, now the way they're recording it, do they give you some reason why they're in there for 3 hours?
No, so we can't, right, so.
You don't know if they're shopping,
Yeah.
you don't know if they're
Yeah.
shopping for a
We-
hospital or stabilizing the patient,
Or shopping
Because
for an
we
ambulance.
can't,
or shopping for an ambulance. fair
I
enough.
mean, let me just
Or
say,
all three.
yeah, we need to know what it looks like and then, yeah, and because could it take 4 or 5 hours? Yeah, depending on where you are. But what we need to do then, as part of our system metrics and, working really closely with Renee and Marie on what does a statewide performance dashboard look like? Like, we should know when things, and it's a little frightening that even though that data isn't required, that you wouldn't be collecting it so you can look at it, because it is a very important system performance improvement. it's nice to be right. Is that what she said to you?
She said.
You have her program.
She never told me that.
Anyway, so sorry, didn't mean to make that so complicated, but I just think it's good to share.
Yeah. Talk something about perhaps ESO developing some linkage between EMS and hospitals. Is that something that would require a bridge?
Yeah, it's the health data exchange that they have. And they're interested in like kind of showing, we did look at it at one point in time several years ago, so I've looked at it, but some of the really neat things about it is it helps provide that information back and forth, and now they have a way that that linkage can send feedback to the EMS from the trauma center. So I do know that they will be at the winter meeting as a vendor, and you know, if I'm sure they're willing to, you know, anybody who wants to take a look at it. I think it might be worthwhile to see. I know Mark was involved. When we looked at the health data exchange with ESO.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he may remember more about it. But it works for strokes and STEMIs too. So.
Yeah, and even at St. Simon's, Regina said that she didn't realize her center was like, Regina, if you want to comment on that, I think you guys were looking into something. So there, you know, there's a lot of promising things kind of on the horizon, but like nothing is really getting us there. And unfortunately, the patients just keep rolling in. And like this one quarter that we looked at, I mean, how many patients was it, Gina?
It was like about 20% of the entire trauma registry number of patients for that quarter. I want to say there were like 10,000 patients for that entire quarter.
10,000.
And then 2,600 something around there
Yeah.
of patients that were transferred in between facilities. So it's
a good number. 40,000
number.
patients a year that like we have no sight line into. We do
Hi, Liz, Gina.
Yes.
Hey, this is Kelly. Good morning. Hey, I just thought about something too, going back to referring to the final destination, not getting the EMS information from the first transport. One of the things we may want to look at, especially on those definitive care hospitals, is we've turned the linkage, which I don't think that's the correct terminology, on a hospital hub, where when that patient arrives at the final destination, they can look and see if there's any other PCRs for that patient for that event, and that definitive hospital can see that PCR for the first transport.
I don't know how much luck the centers have had, because everything has to line up correctly, right? Like the first one name has to match with the final destination name for that linkage and everything to happen. So I think that may be part of the issue, and you know, we can certainly see if centers are having, what kind of success they may be having with that, or are they even, I don't know.
Okay.
Most of them are being given whatever the hospital's John or Jane Doe nomenclature is, and so then they become lost. That is certainly a huge factor in why we only have 16% of the data. You know, if we could get over 50%, that would be great. But yeah, I you know, whatever efforts you and I can work on in the background to maybe look at some of the barriers to that. Regina, again, gets a lot of those. So Regina, I don't know if you want to share how much luck you've been able to get with that.
How old is the commission?
2007.
So 15 years. So it's sad, we were having these same conversations back then.
I did it in 1994.
And here we are still having the same conversations about we can't link any kind of data.
What are other states?
I brought some historical data. I was cleaning up my office. That's 2000.
Courtney gave me my homework.
Oh.
You're welcome, Regina.
Oh, thanks.
I can get out the advocacy if you want to start the pie, so.
So let me ask, I'm gonna pick another wound here. Kelly, are the hospitals getting the trip reports now? Because that has been an issue for a long time. Is that any better?
Courtney, I can answer that. I'll jump over Kelly before she answers. Sorry, Kelly, but I'm just trying to like answer a little bit. We do have the ability to search for trip sheets through the GEMSIS database. If they are not left or scanned, because you know they get scanned later, into the electronic medical record. That it's not 100% capture, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time to try to find it. And apparently not all services upload correctly, but I will comment in relation to that with what Liz had asked earlier. We can almost 0% of the time can find the original trip sheet, just the subsequent sheet of a patient either coming from the field we can find, or Courtney, if they come from your facility to ours, we can maybe 75 or less % of the time find the transport trip sheet.
Frustrating, and it's frustrating on two levels, because I'm not trying to demean what you're doing, but the more important piece to me is a physician caring for the patient got a copy of that trip report in front of him or available to him or her to care for the patient. Because to me, that's the critical piece. I recognize that the data is important too, but so there's still some work to be done there.
Yeah, it's extra work on your end, your services end, and it's extra work on our end trying to hunt them down too. But it's important information. So I've got somebody that does that in our office that just searches for trip sheets.
When you compare us to Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, wherever you compare us to, what's their collection rate on what we're trying to do? Are we way worse, about average?
I know Arkansas is using the armband, and so, and is Texas using them too? Yeah, Texas puts them on everybody too. And so right now, the armband seems to be what I see. There might be other states out there doing something else in terms of their, we know there's other folks out there doing other types of data linkages. I just don't, it's something we need to kind of look at.
Are we worse than surrounding states, contiguous states, for the ability to collect
I
data?
think we're worse. I think we're probably in the middle. I think this isn't a challenge that other people aren't also facing. It's just some people have kind of figured it out.
And if I remember right, the theory of the armband was that the initial EMS unit, assuming they're not a walk-in or drag-in or drop-off, that the initial contact by EMS, they would apply an armband. And the armband's goal was to survive all the way through discharge from rehab or from the hospital. Is that intact on the patient? And then at any point the patient was moved to another facility, that armband number would be reflected on this part of the medical record, whether it was EMS or hospital or rehab or whatever. Is that it basically?
Yeah. Yeah. But there are other ways to get linkages, and some other systems have been successful in getting those data dumps just directly into the registry. I think, what's happened when you look at one of the biggest EMRs out there, Epic, what's happened with sharing of patient information between hospitals with Epic is great. Like the ED physician can go right in and see what happened in it's almost like it's like a real-time kind of thing. So, and there has to be something out there, which I think is what Gina mentioned with ESO. I think that's kind of along that same line. I think that's where we need to get to. I know Liz Benjamin from Grady's on the line, and I can just tell you that like the favorite thing to do of ER people is to cut a band off, or if they go to the OR, that band is getting cut off. So I don't have a whole lot of like hope that.
Well, that's cheaper than the mass trousers they used to cut. So,
Hey.
We were having old timers day earlier. I'm just bringing that back up.
That's a hard policy in our department, in our hospital. They cut off armbands. If it's not their armband, it goes away because they're afraid they'll get bad data somehow. I get that. But the 14-point, from what I'm told, the 14-point data set is almost theoretically impossible to.
And I've seen Hospital Hub, and it's a great tool, but you've got to spell Lee Oliver and the date of birth.
Well,
and
that's
the
what
other
every,
identifier.
yeah,
Exactly
Everything has to
right.
line up.
And if it doesn't, I mean, you understand, it just doesn't match.
that's what.
So I've seen
Virginia-
people try to use that before.
That's
So
what she was alluding to.
it's a
yeah.
great tool, but it's imperfect because it requires such a perfect match.
Right.
In the armband, I think you would have to get the huge buy-in of the hospitals prior to, because if that doesn't, because just like you said, the armbands with, they're scanned for medications, they're scanned for procedures now, that's that patient's unique identifier. So having one on there that has a different code, could be, perceived as a safety issue, like you said, and automatically cut off. So you've got that, I know Tracy from Navicet has, made that clear. You're gonna have to get buy-in from the hospitals up front, prior, for that to be even remotely successful. And I want to say maybe Indiana or Illinois that did a pilot, and that's what they found, that they, there's a lot that has to be done on the front end.
And this goes back to, you remember back in the dark ages with the patient treatment and tracking system.
Yeah.
And I think that system's a good system, but I think we bought into it a little bit before the technology caught up.
Right.
That might be something that we'd like to revisit. I don't know.
But the fact that it's been a year and we've at least gotten down to the percent of patients
Yeah.
that we can get the time. I mean, it took several different, there's just so much data in that repository. It took a while to really refine the data pool to figure out what can we tell you about what we have in here and what can't we tell you. So I think we're there now.
Right.
Now we just need to kind of see what's available out there. What can the commission, if anything, support if there are options? to fix?
I'm assuming that's statewide too, right?
Yes, sir. Mhm.
'Cause,
Yeah. All right. Do you want
It's
to?
gotta be totally different from making that.
Okay, I have the budget pulled up on the screen for those of you. That's the last thing Katie and I kind of wanted to finish with. The legislative session started a week ago, Monday. We will be called for the hearings for the amended budget, and this was the commission's preliminary approved amended budget. And these numbers are not in stone. We know now that we got what the governor released, that our number is much lower. Katie and I are trying to figure out where the discrepancy is in the balance of the super speeder as well as the fireworks excise tax that came to us was actually a little bit more than what we had estimated. It was actually quite a bit more than what we used our AFY 21 allocation as an assumption, because we never know what we're going to get until it comes out and then until the legislators vote on it. So this is what the commission came up with preliminarily as the distribution. So you see there that it would be the 1.6 million. We put it in as a placeholder for the ambulance equipment grants because that's what you had done previously. But even though we don't know the full amount of what that will be, I think it would probably be helpful for you guys, since you have a quorum. It would be helpful for Katie, because when this passes and the commission votes on the final, if you approve what you want that bucket to go for, if you indeed want it to go towards equipment grants again, we can then go ahead and encumber it as such and get started on your application project for that.
You said it was current?
It's going to be less than the 9.1. Katie, do you remember how much it was in what the governor released?
Yeah, 8.5.
0.5, yeah.
Gosh, I thought I saw something from GHA.
8.5.
So are y'all talking with governor's people about where's our money?
Yeah, we're trying to do our own calculations just to make sure, like the assumptions, because I said, I'm not sure, do they base it on is it on the immediate previous year? What they show, the calculations actually work out. So it might just be that our initial assumptions were off. But
What was it last year?
what you're looking at here,
That right
9,
there,
yeah.
9.1 or 9.2.
And remember, this is balance of super speeder. We know that. We get those revenues monthly. The fireworks excise, we don't know until it comes out in the governor's report where they report the revenues.
What we've done, I think, historically is two things with this money. Because quite frankly, when we get the money, we've got a short time frame to spend it. We have to get it done by the end of the fiscal year, because this is the fiscal year round out, whatever you want to call it. Georgia's a state that they have to have a balanced budget, so we have a little budget to kind of flesh that out, so we don't get too big a bind. So my memory is that we've used it for two pieces of possible proposal. Sometimes we bought some ABLS equipment, sometimes we just use it for the equipment grants. Either way works, because either way we can encumber the money and spend it in equipment. So y'all have, you can have a call meeting if you want after we get the exact amount. We can go forward today.
This is additional.
This is money that we don't have in our bucket right at the moment. This is,
Yes, amended.
you know, this is the amended budget. This is not it. This is what we have speculated, but if the speculation is going to be different.
Right now, we have 9.1, they have 8.5, so we gotta cut this by about 500 to 600,000. So it means that the 1.6 won't be 1.6, it might be 1.2.
So,
Did y'all get it in Clark County?
well, it won't be 1.2.
No, it's not. Oh,
Or
Yeah, but anyway, it'll be different.
just,
It'll be different.
not the, no, yeah, it will be different than what it is here.
So bottom line is, I mean, we can do that, then do it at call meeting. I would assume that in an interesting term, that probably in 6 or 8 weeks, the amended budget will be approved at some level. Now, this goes up and down. It will be in front of the appropriations committee on both sides, and they'll make, you know, how it's worked, jumping around.
So really what you're asking for is, you want a motion to approve this amount, realizing it may be adjusted downward for the total.
Yeah, what, I'm not even asking, I'm putting out a couple of possibilities. We can vote today because we have a quorum to put this, whatever amount it is, into the equipment grant. We can vote to put it into equipment grant and ABLS. We can vote to do anything care to on legal. Or we can wait and see what the exact amount comes out to be and have a call meeting or something. But when we get the exact amount from the trauma commission, I would like to be ready to move.
And regardless, we've got to have it complete by June 30, right?
Yeah, that's why if you
That's why
vote,
it's so
if you
tight.
vote on how you want the bucket to go now, we can be actionable on it a lot quicker once it actually passes, because the amended passes first, and we don't get the, you know, and what they call the annual budget, or what we sometimes refer to as the base, which is usually somewhere around 14 million.
So what we may do, Lee, just a thought, we may vote to support the equipment grant. And then they will know that that's coming up, and then go ahead and start that work, and we don't put a number to it at this point.
I think that would be the simplest.
I'm fine with that.
It would be the least, it would have the least.
That would give y'all to go ahead. and
We could at least start
working.
the application process, because Katie's already started the process with OEMS&T about validating the number of services and the contacts.
And then when we vote, the amount of money is just a matter of plugging that into the grant.
Courtney, this is,
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Holmes, yeah,
if he's making a motion, this is Sam, I'll second.
okay. I got Blake making the motion, Sam Pope as a second.
I'm sorry, I think I've interrupted him though.
That's okay. That's, you're a member.
I know we usually have the discussion and then we have the vote, so I guess now we're in discussion phase, so. If I remember correctly, y'all poll the state office or regional office or something to determine the number of 911 trucks. So there's a validation process there, and then the application period starts. Is that basically it?
That's correct, yeah. And then we can get your money to you quickly, and Gabby now has a validation.
I just was trying to remember the
validation
process, so.
Question for the minutes. What was the motion?
The motion is that we will support the
Equipment grants.
Funds going.
yeah,
into the
funds
equipment
going to the
grant.
equipment grant.
The amended
There's
funds.
not a specific amount in that. we support the equipment grant, and there will be funds put into the equipment.
And that'll have the least impact if the numbers change.
And Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had talked about we might need to hold on any more AVLS equipment purchases just because of the supply chain. Is that still an issue, or could you still, if there's, depending on what happens with this full allocation? If we have to-
Okay, so current situation is, as of today, we're just about used up all of our inventory of units that we bought with last year's funds. And so for the next 6 months, we are likely to need about $15,000 worth of equipment for new trucks that are coming online and replacements of units that are out of warranty, because we have some now that are over 5 years old. And that will get us through the rest of this fiscal year. And then for next fiscal year, we're beginning to explore what the technology situation is and what our needs are. And as we work on the budget for next fiscal year, we need to talk about what that amount would be.
So Tim, will you kind of round that figure off and send us something to Liz and copy it to me so we'll know what that figure is? And we'll get it out to the rest of the committee members so that when we vote at some future day on exactly how we split this money up, we'll have some numbers. Is that fair?
I will, yes, I will do that. I'm about, on the report that I'm about to show you, it ends on December 31st. And so that numbers there won't look the same as where they are today, because we've had a significant change in the last couple of weeks. But I will send you that information so you can send it out.
So I got a motion that's on the floor.
This is Katie. Hey, Tim and I spoke when we were encumbering the funds for the AVLS for the remainder of the year. And there's about 25,000 available in the AVLS that we budgeted for that is not encumbered at this time. Unless, Tim, there's been any overages or anything that you see that we need to increase the amount we discussed, I think it was last month. We have 25,000
No.
that's available for the 50,000 that he would need.
Yeah, that'll take care of me for the rest of this fiscal year.
Write that down. That's in the minutes. Jim will be taken care of. So if y'all will get together and make sure that we spend the money, but if we don't need any of this money to keep the AVLS program going, then that makes that decision a little easier. So if y'all will talk and just come, if there's a need, Tim, let us know that.
Okay.
So are we still working on the motion? Any other?
Vote. I think, did we vote?
Nope, not yet. Any other questions or comments? Are y'all voting on the phone?
I'm texting you because we're gonna talk about you in a minute.
They had contact me.
So all in favor of the
actually
motion, all in favor of the motion is aye.
Aye.
If there's any opposition to the motion, please let that be known. I hear no opposition, so I declare the unanimous vote in favor.
I was just clarifying with Lee that instead of using wristbands on trying to get this data, we can use the microchips that came with the vaccines.
Okay. Well,
Please don't put that in there.
The confusing part
Please
is
don't put that in
for those of us who have all three, which number you'll use.
That'll be the next booster.
Liz, did you have?
If they have a chip, we could just put an RFD reader in the back of the truck, right?
That's right.
I've actually considered at one time about using, the driver's license have a QR code on them now. And we had talked a little bit about that, and I got to thinking about the optics of us going into somebody's wallet at the scene of an accident, and I thought, no, I don't want that on video. That's not a great option. Anyway, Liz, did you have anything else?
No, unless anybody has any other questions about anything else on that amended budget, certainly happy to answer any questions. It's a lot of money.
Hearing none, we'll move on. Tim, AVLS program update.
Can you share your screen, Tim?
I'm gonna do 15,000 left.
We can see it, Tim. That's great. Thank you.
I'm sorry, test. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Right.
Mhm. It was
Okay.
in presentation mode and now it's back on the,
And when I put it in presentation mode, you could see it okay?
yeah. Mhm.
I'm going to go back to that then.
Great.
So here's the report for our fiscal year 2022 quarter two that ended in December. And I'll go quickly through these things because you have copies of this. There's a list of the kinds of troubleshooting kinds of things that we were involved with during the quarter, and some of the kinds of things that were going on with various agencies. You can see a variety of different kinds of things that we deal with. Here's, I think, the most important thing, since we just were talking about this, year to date on this year's budget, we've spent nothing on gateways because it was all funded from the previous year. So we got that. And here's what we did in the quarter. Units delivered. We bought 10 units for Gold Cross, replacement units for Gold Cross back in October, one for Johnson City, 2 replacement units for Screven, 2 new and 2 replacements for Bryan, 6 new for Floyd County, and 6 for replacements for Puckett. It left us at the end of the year with about 16 units remaining in storage to be deployed. Since the end of the year until now, we've got pretty tight on commitments. I have a meeting today. ITS has hired a new salesperson finally to replace the one that left last year, and so we're getting down to nearly expending all the money that we had in the current purchase order, minus that 25,000 that we were just talking about. So that's where our status is at the moment. Vendor referral kinds of things that we're involved with is Banks County, they had a unit with the water damage and they purchased a replacement for it. We coordinated purchasing for these various agencies. And these are some of the other kinds of things that we're doing administratively. Lots of meetings with Sierra Wireless and ITS these days because of changes at Sierra Wireless and ITS. Here's our usage situation for the quarter. It's effective the end of the year by region. About 1,075 active units out of 1,369 total that are out there, 79% up. And you can see the difference by region and so on that are out there. We have a quick reference guide that was last updated on June 30th. That's available for people who need it when they have changes of personnel and that sort of thing in the agencies that are responsible for AVLS. That we keep that up to date. It's still current.
Jim, I'll let Lee ask you.
No, go ahead, Mark. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
So I'm looking at, let's look at Region 4 for just a minute. At
Region 4?
Well, it's 52 is what I'm seeing. Region 4, 52% of them are active.
Yes.
Is that service specific? You got one service that's just not using them?
No, it's not entirely. There's a portion of that that's that way, but there's also been a fair bit of change and turmoil in Region 4, and they're in the process of bringing those up. So I think that's going to be increasing, but that has been the case, and part of that was Columbus Fire, because they stopped using the units. So the coverage in Muskogee County and there is by Mid-Georgia and one other company. Even though Columbus Fire still has a 911 responsibility, they're not using the AVLS. That's why it's pink down there.
Yeah, I still, let's go back. Columbus is not in Region 4, but let's go back and just pick on 4 for just a minute. And
okay.
Help me understand that only 52, we're paying a lot of money for that. Why is 52% of them or 48% of them not being used?
Well, it's 4
Yep.
and 5.
Yeah.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
number 5.
I mean, obviously we should be able to kind of pick out where these things are not being used and have some conversations with those folks.
Oh, we are definitely having conversations, but part of the problem is in some of the smaller agencies that they get the equipment in and then it takes them a long time to get the equipment installed, and old equipment is down, and so it's a long transition of getting new stuff installed, and part of that's because they don't have the IT resources and such themselves to do it. And there have also been a fair amount of churn in leadership in the organizations. So I am talking with all of these folks about it and working with them. And for example, Spalding Hospital is Region 4, right?
Yeah.
Spalding County.
Yes.
All of their units are down, and I'm talking with Thomas Perry there, and we're going to. Who took over, and the person who was running the AVLS just left, retired. And so we've got Sierra Wireless and ITS coming out to do an assessment on site and get a plan with them to get all their units back up and running. Thomas Perry took up. Yes.
No, go ahead. I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, when Thomas Perry took over, he did not know about the AVLS system. And so when I talked to him, it was a bit of enlightenment. And so now we're moving forward. So we have that kind of turmoil going on at the moment.
Hey, so I got a question. I'm not doubting you a bit, Tim, but I think it's Matt Perry. Matt Perry was the fire EMS chief, whatever, in Forsyth, Monroe County. So they run EMS and fire there. So I don't understand why he doesn't know their ambulances had them, because before that it was Helton who went to Grady and was doing all the telemedicine stuff. So yeah, Paul Beeman. So if y'all remember, we were at MSAC looking at Paul Beeman's trucks doing telemedicine in Forsyth 10 years ago, whatever. So I'm not doubting you a bit. Just some of that doesn't make sense to me. But if you look at Region 4, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, so it's Matthew Perry, but his name is Thomas too. His email address is Thomas Perry. But but yes, when I called him and talked to him about it, he was unaware of what the situation was at Spalding EMS with regard to AVLS. Why that was the case, I don't know, but he's now on top of it.
Okay, great.
Hey,
So,
this is Sam also, and there as he said, there's several things going on in the region. There's a couple of providers turning over, and also even with our department, we're down some trucks right now. We have them on order, so we have units that are sitting, so they're not connected right now. because they're
Right.
waiting for the trucks that are being replaced. We had to take trucks out of service, and we have the new trucks on order, so the equipment's there. It's just waiting for the truck to arrive.
Yeah.
So that we're a
That's- and
significant chunk in the region.
And that's a common issue across the state. It's a little bigger and more exacerbated at the moment in Region 4.
So what's, in Region 4 and Region 5, I'll ask this for 5, because 5 actually has more trucks, it has 48 that aren't being used, and 4 has 41, that's pretty significant. Where, can you send me a list of the 48, where they are in Region 5? That's a bunch of trucks.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
That's 100 almost.
And
I know for Georgia Tech, it's 91, but it's close to 100 for me. Just a Mercer grad.
Right.
So
So Tim, I was wondering, would it make sense that we just shut these devices down after 60 days? And then if somebody needs them brought back online, they can, but at least we're not paying that monthly fee for these things to be sitting on the shelf somewhere.
Well, that's true, and we have been doing that. I just shut down about 300 units last in December, and went through them and cleaned them up as the rotation was going, new ones coming in and old ones going out. So yes, it is that, and right this moment I have the folks from Verizon giving me a report that and that's every unit that has not been online in 90 days, and we're turning those off. So, and as you and I think several others may know, that just means you have to call me back to get it turned back on. So it works. We're tightening and tightening and tightening on that, but it is a little challenging because I don't want to turn things off too quickly when it may be that the unit's simply sitting in reserve and then it gets called out and all of a sudden it's got no AVLS. So that's
I just think that 60 days should be plenty of time. You know, if somebody's not using a reserve truck at 2 months.
yeah.
You know,
Is there an issue turning, if you, and Sam, I'm gonna pick on you for a second, if you don't mind. If Sam calls you and tells you unit 1 and 2 are out of service because they're replacing them, and with supply chain, it's gonna be 6 months before they're able to put those units back in service, that's the delivery of the new trucks. Can you turn those 2 units off for 6 months without any penalties or issues? And then Sam calls you and says, hey, we're putting these trucks back online next week or next month and turn them back on. Can you do that?
I can suspend them for 90 days and then they automatically come back on. Or I can, the other option is I can have them deactivated, and then we can, if it's within, I think it's 6 months, usually I can reactivate that SIM. Otherwise, I have to have a new SIM shipped to Sam.
Can you, if you deactivate it for 90 days, I think is what you said. Once it comes back on, can you turn it back off for another 90 days? Or you do
My
that one
experience
time?
with that, I can do it one time, the way their system is set up right now.
So that would buy you 6 months. You get it deactivated for 90
Yeah.
days, turn it back on, and then is that what you said? That would buy you 6 months.
That's
of
what I
not-
was trying to
of
work
not
into.
having to pay airtime for a.
What's the airtime for?
About it's roughly $40, just under.
I mean, that's 11, a month, right? That's a,
Yeah.
yeah, I know, yeah. That's 11, that's almost,
Katie has the calculator.
that's almost $12,000 a month in
Yeah.
unused air. I mean, it'll never be 100%. Hey, Tim, I tell you something that would be helpful for me, because I was sitting here looking at these numbers. Can you add a column on your report in the future, if it's okay with you and Courtney, that just has a list of the units that are out of service? Because if you look at Region 3, it's at 83%, but that's 41 units right there, which is
Right.
almost the same number, was the same number as Region 4. So,
And that would be a hell of a job, I guess, that if it's the same unit month after month, then.
Turn it off.
Turn it
Yeah,
off.
exactly.
yeah,
But if it's a
Yeah.
variety of units.
I agree with you. That's a fair comment. In Region 3, if it's 41 units and that makes up 12 services, it's not worth chasing.
Yeah.
In Region 4 and 5, if that number is 1 or 2 services, I mean, honestly, when you send me the list, I'm gonna look at it and go, okay, hey, I need to call Houston County, or, and I'm just picking on Houston County. Whatever it is, and say, hey, what's going on? Get with Tim and say, hey, what can we do? And if it's a Matt Perry scenario, which I'm worried about, but it's not my concern being in Region 4, then he may know exactly what it is.
So
That's a bunch of units.
And maybe
Kim.
even to go a step further is to include the amount that's being spent monthly on units that are not,
Right.
because that would be the metric to try to set a target to be
Right.
below, set a threshold to say you want to be
Right.
under that. And all of these metrics are in the contract. So whatever else you guys want to see, we can add that to the next
Sure.
contract, just so
Yeah.
we're clear on what metrics we want to look
So-
at.
I wonder if we don't.
This is Sam.
Go ahead, Sam.
I just have one question. Tim, of the however many units total that are not in service right now, not active right now, are all of those still connected? Are we paying for all those, or are the majority of those actually turned off right
So at the moment, what we're paying for right now is 1,205 units.
Okay.
If you see the screen there right now.
So a good chunk of what's not active right now, we're not even paying for right now. We're paying for maybe about 200.
That's about 150. That's correct.
Okay. And the other suggestion I had is when you have a service, especially like something that's going on in Spalding, where there's the majority or the whole service is not showing up. Have you been reaching out to maybe the RTAC coordinators in that region to maybe help you with, contacting that service and working with them and kind of helping coordinate to help and maybe find resources that they need help to get them turned back on and get them active? There's other people, there's other services and all that may be willing to come help them get that together.
Yes, in some cases, that's the case. That I've done that. And I do have a kind of cadre of people out there like Brian Pennell and Lloyd Sherling and some others around the state who come and help. In fact, in talking with Matthew yesterday, we talked about having Jason Abelys from Fayette County come over and talk with them and look at their system, because they have a comparable kind of system at Fayette County, and they've had similar kind of experiences in the past. So yes, those are things that we are doing. I think one thing to remember about these numbers is that these numbers are on a given day, and they were on the last day of the fiscal year or of the month of December. So, and they change on a daily basis as we go along. So that's part of what needs to happen here. So we can pick at the end of any given period and look at and calculate the amount of money and set that target and do that. And I think that will help. But the practical side is exactly what Sam's talking about, and that is talking to the folks and doing that. Have you talked to 2 or 3 of the RTACs and have gotten some help there, but not all? So any help that I can get would be appreciated in doing that.
Tim, if you will, go ahead. We kind of interrupted your presentation, so.
Okay, so there's what we're using to on the last day of the quarter, and here's where we currently have 691 units on Verizon, 150 on AT&T. We had 0 on T-Mobile. I will just tell you as an aside that since the first of the year, Heartland has converted over to T-Mobile on theirs, and Southern Link has picked up 364 units around the state. So we're paying, the Trauma Commission is paying airtime for 1,205 units right now. Then any questions on that?
Point out I represent Region 10, so. 91. Two were the highest. That's what counts.
I could start bringing gold medals for people, right? And then we have a new leader orient couple of videos that were made with Sierra Wireless and that are out there, and some new directors in Worth County, and also I sent these also to Matthew over in there in I'm sorry, it's the name of the county. I'm getting old. Anyway, that's where we stand. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you, Tim. Jim's EMS education presentation. Kim, are you still on board?
I am. Hey, Courtney, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Just wanted to take a few minutes this morning to go over a couple of things. And I think that all of you have as our report, you have the last invoice that was submitted that has the detail of really the last quarter of the year of some of our training and things that were going on there. If anyone has any questions at the end, I'll be glad to answer those. But I did want to talk a little bit about some of the items that we have coming up. Kathy wanted me to apologize to everyone for her not being able to be on today. For those of you that don't know, she and Keith have had some difficulties over the last couple of months. Kathy fell while she was at Disney World and subsequently had to have some pretty major surgery on her wrist and elbow. She's doing much better, but she did have physical therapy today. And then while she's trying to get over that, Keith had to have surgery this week for a torn rotator cuff and several tendons to be repaired. So he is also recovering from that. Hopefully they have one good arm between the two of them and they can get better soon, but y'all please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. One of the easiest things for me to do is, Liz, if I can share the screen. Wanted to, yeah. Wanted to go to our website, and probably will give everybody a little bit more detail on the things as I'm going through them. So I'm not giving you not on here taking a lot of everybody's time, but we do have a lot of training courses that are coming up. And the best place for everybody to find out about that is on our website. And there's a training tab on the homepage of the website that lists all of the courses and different dates coming up for that. The next thing we have coming up, actually is this weekend, we have the Axioms Revisited class that's going to be taking place. And we are still in the process of finding out if the lead for that program is going to be able to continue with the Axioms leadership programs. He has gone through chemo, and we'll find out more about that over the next few weeks. But hopefully we're going to be able to get those classes started up again very soon. Our trauma skills labs, the next one you see, we've got one coming up next weekend in Muskogee County. And you see the schedule there of all of the regions that we will be hitting between now and June. So we have a great cadre of instructors for that program. Also wanted to, I'll throw out something at the end of this of something that we wanted to do for the instructors that are participating in a regular basis on that training. Also, some of the things that have been very popular for us and getting a lot of feedback and really can't keep up with the number of classes that are being requested. The Farm Medic course is one that has really been a great success for us. One thing that I also will mention when it comes to the farm medic course, and also specific training like the TECC courses. Some of these are very specific in the type of venues that we have to do these courses. And so we tend to work in the same areas over and over again until we can get new training sites. Now, for a farm medic course, there are specific things that they have to have, but for a TECC course, the day 2 scenarios, we have to get that approved through NAEMT for the site registry that we have to do there. But you'll see on our website all of the courses that we have coming up if anybody has questions about that. Also, on a couple of things that that are coming up too that you may not know about. We do have the application process right now that will end January 31st for the upcoming year of year 11 of the leadership program. We've already received a lot of applications, but they have until January 31st to get those in. And we'll be making selection again for this year's class, another 25 to 28 students that will be part of that. But what came out of the year 10 program of the leadership class, that the alumni of that class really took on a task of developing a curriculum for a 1.5 day intro to leadership, where we really are not hitting on a lot of our upcoming people into EMS, giving them some of the tools that they need as they move up in leadership. So they came up with all completely on their own, using the leadership program as a model, but developed a curriculum that was more geared toward a new manager, new leader coming into EMS. That curriculum set, and they have a pilot class that actually has been funded by the Trauma Foundation, the Trauma Emergency Preparedness Foundation. And that will be 25 students that have been selected that will participate in the pilot program on February 1st and 2nd. We've had such great success with the leadership program, and we feel like that with this class taking the initiative and doing what they are doing for an upcoming program like this, I wanted to throw that out to the subcommittee to just be thinking about whether you feel that this might be something that could hopefully be funded by Trauma Commission in the upcoming year, or if there's questions about it, more obviously after the pilot program on February 1st and 2nd, but I did want to at least give you some information about that. Also, just a couple of other things, because we have a lot going on right now, but we do have our awards banquet this year. Will be in coordination with the leadership conference that will be at Lake Lanier. So we'll have a lot of people that will be recognized during that, and wanted to make sure I open that up as an opportunity for anyone to attend that banquet if you're interested. We have a new job posting site on our website. Now, in the past, we've been taking positions or information that are provided to us by service directors, and we've been going through posting them on there. But now we have an interactive job posting site that will be getting more information out to our membership and to the commission in the next few weeks. But everyone, I certainly don't have to tell you about staffing issues and the things that we're facing. So we're looking at all of those opportunities that we can find to help our profession. And with that, Courtney and Liz, I will turn it back over to you unless anyone has questions of me.
I got a question, Kim.
Okay.
I think you already heard from me, but the farm safety class that was taught in our county about 30 days ago, I was just being nosy, went to that class, signed up for it, just wanted to make sure everybody showed up. We had about 50% of them showed up that class. But the instructor, the class, I think they was from Tifton, I think, but they wasn't around our neighborhood. And I've been through a lot of instruction. I've been through a lot of classes in the last 48 years. Them instructors from Tift County on that farm safety was probably some of the best instructors I've seen, and some of the best class I've seen in the last 48 years. And I want to thank you for getting them guys together. And they do need a dummy. I don't know how much it's going to cost, but somewhere down the road.
Are you
That's why
volunteering?
Yeah. I don't mind volunteering, but I'm telling you, that's a hell of a class. If you hadn't been through it, my age, now, it's just, I really enjoyed the 2 days. And the class was one of the best classes I've been to in a long time. But
Blake,
I tell you that-
Blake, I wanted to tell you, I thank you for your comments about that, and I'm glad you said that because that did lead me into the other information that I wanted to share with you. What we have had, I guess, probably the greatest success with is that we use established cadres of instructors in these classes that really are the most popular, that we're getting overloaded with people that want the classes and trying to get them out there. But we know, using the experienced instructors that we have that consistently show up and are always there to do these classes, we have the ability now to send them to some additional training. This kind of applies mostly to the TECC course, the Farm Medic course, and the Trauma Skills Lab. There are different training opportunities that have been provided to me to keep these instructors really at the top of their game, to make sure that we are putting out the most current information. So that is something that I might be bringing back to the subcommittee for consideration of training for the instructors for these programs.
Yeah. Kim, if you will, get back with the instructors and tell them that the members of the subcommittee heard Blake make a compliment and we're trying to get our mouths closed now.
I have a question, Kim.
Okay.
On the TECC classes, the schedule you had posted up,
Yes.
they seem to be in during the year, duplicate locations during the year. Is there a reason for that? Like
If they
several of the
could,
counties.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So the schedule you had posted up a minute ago for the TECC classes,
Right.
during the year, there was classes in the same counties multiple times during the year.
Yes,
Like
and the reason for
Columbia.
that, though, Huey, is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the reason for that, and we are doing more now, and it really requires me to do it since I am the affiliate faculty for the program. We have to go to the facility specifically where these classes are being taught, and there are specific guidelines for primarily the day 2 scenarios that have to be met for to be able to do them there. So when we're not able to get a service cleared on doing those day 2 scenarios, we do end up, to make sure that we're still spending the money and getting courses done, we are having to go back to some of those areas multiple times. But I'm working on that specifically to get into other areas where we're covering all 10 regions.
Hey, Kim, this is Lee. Do you mind putting the list back up?
Hang on just a second.
On
Which list?
the list of where the classes were.
I mean, the list, like,
The one that had the
Had
location.
the dates and location for TECC.
Yeah, hang on just a minute.
She's getting
Yeah,
it.
thank you, Kim.
Uh-huh. In addition to this also, and it's not actually part of our funding, but there's also TECC funding that has been provided in Region 5. And I think there are 3 classes, either 2 or 3, that are coming up in Region 5. I know one was in Warner Robins and possibly 2 in Macon.
Hey, Pete's not here today, so I'm going to ask a Region 3 question. Unless I'm missing it, I don't see a Region 3 class. Is there something else being done, or are they just not even planned for Region 3?
The only information I can give you on that, Lee, is that for a time there was another group that actually had been funded also by our funding, and then Region 3 decided to do their own, excuse me, using their own funding as far as their regional improvement grant to fund TECC classes in Region 3. And that's the only reason that we haven't, that there's not one listed here. I'm not sure that group is still doing those courses as part of that regional improvement grant. But if there are locations in Region 3 that are interested in a class, we definitely will be able to accommodate them as well. That's the only reason we haven't been there.
So yeah, looking at your list, we've got Bryan, Lowndes, Tiff, Columbia, Muskogee, and Floyd. are, that's 80% of your classes being taught are just in those 4
But-
counties.
But Huey, I will say that even in those locations, which it is not the most convenient situation, I'm sure to get, if it's not in that particular county, but we are pulling in participants in those classes from an entire region. It is not specific to that service. In fact, that's one of the things that when we go in and actually advertise this for an area, the host county gets 4 seats in the class that are designated for them. And it's opened up and advertised for the entire state in each area that we go into.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying that it is, for those, the vast majority of what's on the board is 4 regions. And so we've got 10 in the state. And so
But now,
it's not-
Huey, this is Chad. Services need to apply for those classes. That's up to the individual services in the regions. If they want to host one, they have to apply for it. Like we've hosted 2 or 3 up in Habersham. We've not done one, of course, this year. But that's up to the services to be proactive and go out and apply to host those classes. Correct, Kim?
That's correct. And Huey, once they do that, once they let me know that they're interested in hosting a class, then if they don't have an NAMT site designation for TECC, then I go there to that location and I get them checked off in order for them to be able to host that.
Is there not a way to do a needs assessment of where the classes need to be? Like most of these classes are 4-year like certification types. One thing I'm working with Kim on is getting the zip codes of where people are coming from, because I think right now we just show like on the map. What I do in the annual report is we just block out the county that it was taught in, but to her point, to Kim's point about where the participants are coming from, we need more of like a heat map to see what areas we're reaching.
And would
because
you
we don't have that.
delineate like field provider and hospital provider?
We could. The other thing we talked about doing is primary service and secondaries, because many people have multiple jobs, right? So who's your primary, where's your zip code of your primary employer, so you can see. But are folks, for you guys that hire EMS folks, are they required to have these courses? So do you have to do them if you don't have a grant
Not
funding?
the
Not the-
Okay.
Most of them right now are just
ACLS
requiring that they have a pulse and a
And
patch.
PALS and-
40
Hey,
hours.
Courtney, I have a
Person.
comment.
Yes.
Putting on my secretary treasurer of the commission hat, and looking at these things, Chad, I appreciate and understand what you were saying about services needing to apply for these, but I think from a global perspective, I think, I think we need to step back and look at where are these courses being, and are we meeting the educational needs across the entire state? Because people are not taking advantage. I mean, it's great that they're taking advantage of this education. It's good education. But if the same people are applying or courses are being repeated in the same areas, are there gaps in training and education that are being missed? If our goal is to increase the education and care delivery by pre-hospital providers across the state of Georgia for the trauma system, how can we demonstrate or show that that's happening? It's probably not, Kim and her team may be doing that on the back end. And it's good that services need to apply, because you definitely want to make sure you have engagement of the service that's hosting or the county that's hosting. But there should be some process looking at how often has that service had a course in the last 2 years, 3 years, say. Is there a need identified there versus another area, more proactive reaching out to areas where it appears that these educational classes are not being offered on a frequent basis?
And Regina, I appreciate your comments on that too. And obviously, it's we do realize that there are multiple classes being taught in the same location. I ask you again to consider that there's very specific details of what has to go on in the day 2 scenarios. Not every location can offer the venue to be able to do those courses. And that's something that it's going to require a little bit more legwork on the services part. And however we need to educate them to make sure that we can get this expanded to cover more area of the state, we need to do that. But every service is not going to be able to meet the requirement to be a site designation for TECC.
Yeah, to do that. And that makes sense, maybe broadening making sure that they're spread out or there's enough services throughout the state that are able to, that's where some of this funding could be focused on, is making sure that there's at least one, group the regions together. I don't know how we would do it, split the state, however you guys look at it, but identifying areas so that the course can be taught throughout the state, and focusing on spending some of the dollars doing that, maybe. Just an idea.
Can we just identify sites where they need to then go in and approve, or would be helpful to have those sites approved?
No. Not for, when we did one in Emmanuel County. It takes, we had people there, like, we had some there who drove in and out before, from Atlanta area, but most of them came out of 3 regions, 6, 5, and 9. And we had a full class. And, we could do it there again. It might look like Swainsboro getting a bunch, but 3 regions benefited from it. So I think the exact location of the class is immaterial. The fact that we've got regions that don't have classes, that may be an issue we need to look at. But I do know Region 3, they've done it this year, but in the past they had RTAC money that they were doing some on their own. I think some other regions did some on their own, so I don't know. But I do know that there's been conversations to try to make it equitable across the world. But at the same time, to identify a site and go and say, we want to do it here, and nobody's there to support it. You just like at Swainsboro. If I hadn't been there to support it, it's on the weekend, nobody would have known how to turn on heat at the tech school. Nobody knew how to open the doors at the tech school. So you've got to have somebody locally who was the champion for that course. If you don't, it's going to be miserable.
Well, to that point also, Courtney, if I could add something else, I've been working with a service up in very North Georgia that came to us and said that they were interested in hosting a TECC class. I've gone on now 2.5, almost 3 months of trying to get them to get the details for me so I can get the NAMT site designation. Same thing with a service in Region 9 that I had to go through about 3 months of working with them, trying to get them, because there's information for that site designation that has to be done by the service. It requires their medical director information and all of that has to be done for an NAMT class. And they have to be able to be involved in that.
But one thing I did hear that I think might have been from Liz that I think would be fairly easy, because you get the documents from everybody about their where they live, their address when they sign up. I think that'd be fairly easy, not for me, but someone who knows what they're doing, to put that into a heat map, so we see exactly. But we would need to do that too and reach out to all the families, because if Region 3 is doing another RTAC fund, that's still trauma funds. So I'd like to identify those too. And I don't know if y'all have funds marked anymore, but I think
No, they did a couple courses with money. They had residual funds they had.
If
That was really it. That doesn't touch many people.
if they're doing it from some other funds that I don't think it might be good to look at it just from a standpoint, but from our funding point, I just look at the ones that the trauma commission.
This is Sam. Hey, I do know in Region 3, they also did some of those classes with money from coalitions. But on the subject of what we're discussing, one of the things that would probably help again here is in working with the RTAC coordinators in the regions to help bridge the gap with and help finding locations within regions. Our service even looked at one, but we don't have, because we have so much already going on with recruit classes, EMT classes, and paramedic classes, we just didn't have the space capability currently. So, and that's what one of the things some of the larger services may have. is not just that they can't, it might not be that they can't meet the requirements, is they just don't have the current capability because they're trying to unload so many personnel. But I think, if we can get the RTEC coordinators with GEMSA, working with GEMSA to help them identify, if I agree it needs to be spread out more, but if we're having such a problem identifying sites and getting services to actually respond with the information that's needed to get the site approvals, that's, the RTAC coordinators are much more localized to those regions. Maybe they can help bridge that gap.
And the subcommittee representatives as well.
I'll be, Sam,
Yes, I agreed there too.
I think the RTACs may be a great resource, but at the same time, if we're going to them external and trying to convince them to do it, or if you're having to beg information out of them, that's not a good way to do it. You've got to have a local champion that's going to support it and be there to make sure the local resources are there for them. Because these instructors are coming from out of town. You need to champion it at the local level, and if they're not going to champion it, you'd be best to walk away from it.
Well, and I'm actually talking about the services that have contacted but not followed up.
Yeah.
Because, we talk about the turnover with ABLS, things like that. How do the services or RTAC coordinators or whatever, obviously Region 5 has got it figured out because Crystal's doing it, and Crystal stays very involved, and Mark's here and he stays involved as well. But statewide, how do they know to apply for a TECC class? Because I guess now you're really looking at TECC classes for 2023. Is that what you're really planning for now?
Well,
Since
she's
the calendar-
finishing out. Yeah, I mean, what she has up there, they post as they add, or sorry, Kim, I don't want to speak for you, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, most of the courses, at least for the NAMT curriculum, usually we're at somewhere around 24. We have gone up to near 30 if we were able to get them in there, because a lot of times, to be honest with you, we're taking registration for up to 30 because we know we're going to have so many cancellations a day or two for every course.
How do they know to apply for it? I guess is my question.
Well, they could be at this meeting today.
Fair comment.
How do they know to apply for any of the courses that we have, Lee?
Now, how do they know to apply to have the sponsor a course, I guess?
We send out at the beginning of the funding year, we send out a letter with all of the different courses that we have under our budget. And the application is actually in a link in the email that we sent out. We also have provided that to ACCG and to the Trauma Commission office with them to fill out usually what is no more than a page to a page and a half application if they want to host any of the NAMT courses or any of the budgeted classes we have under our responsibility.
That's great. Who does that go to, Kim? Because I imagine that list is difficult to maintain.
It's very difficult to maintain. And I'll be honest with you, the biggest problem that we have is a lot of times it goes first to the directors of the service. The directors, a lot of times, not pointing fingers, but sometimes the directors are not passing that down to their training personnel. The training personnel are saying, we never hear anything about it. We'd like to have a class. And it's just a sometimes not good communication within the service where you may have training that wants to take that on, but they don't get it from the service directors.
I'm just throwing this out, Liz. I don't even know this is an option. And Mark's sitting here, so he may laugh at me when I say it, but
If he doesn't, I will.
there's always people to appreciate you in the room. So is that something we should request? We push out to the RTAC coordinators and ask them to discuss in their RTAC meetings is the need for TECC and other classes? I'm just asking.
It'd be completely appropriate. Just have to know when the funding is available and how much we have to.
perusing around the NAEMT, I'm just looking for like a list of the approved training sites. Cause I think we gotta get a handle on what are the
Sites.
sites, right? And then figure out like,
My understanding of the sites is, if I may, is you approve that site, it's only for that one class.
It's only,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
you're right, Mark. Once you have NAMT site approval, you are only given approval for a specific class that you're applying for through NAMT. Now that's not GEMSA specific. So for instance, I have a 5410 site code at the training center in Forsyth. I am approved to teach all of the NAMT curriculum because I've applied for them. But you may have Habersham County may only be approved for AMLS and TECC. So every time that an additional discipline is added to that, I have to check that off as the affiliate to be able to make sure that they meet the requirements of NAMT to be a host site.
for a specific course.
Yes.
Yeah, in Region 3, we've done these courses through the improvement grants when we have those funds, and we put that out there to everybody, all the agencies and regions, asking, hey, if you want to do a TCC club or whatever it is, just let me know. Yeah, we haven't had the regional funds. So yes, we have done classes through Region D and Region N in Region 3 or in those respective regions, but with everything going on right now, those funds are pretty tight. So we do the same thing. We send that out. Anybody want to do a class, let us know.
So unless there's some new information, I'm gonna move on.
Hey, Courtney, I'm gonna make a mention that I think each of these members should go back and make sure that the announcements are made at their council meetings, which I'm sure they do. However, we spend a little time at our council meetings to make sure that they know that GEMSA offers a plethora of courses. There's no need for them to ever hesitate in contacting them for those courses. Now, we also invite members of not just the directors, but we also invite members with them as well to be visitors, and they get to hear this information as well versus just the directors. But we take an opportunity every council meeting and speak about some of the classes that they're offering, and to make sure if they want classes to contact Kim or Kathy, either one.
And I'll add in that when the regional directors and the training coordinators also send out that information to all of the ambulance services, as well as all of the education programs too.
Yes, Kelly, y'all do. And thank you very much, you and Vic both, for sharing that information, because we're only as good at getting these classes handled as the information gets out. So I appreciate everything that all of you are doing in getting that information out.
Anything else? So we talked about EMS funding. FY23 budget is not, the governor has not released that I'm aware of. We're working on the AY, and I would assume in another couple of 3 weeks of going through the appropriations committee hearings now, this sort of thing. So it's going to be some time now before we actually see the 23 budget. But y'all go back to your membership, your councils or whoever you represent, and talk to them. If there's things that they're doing that they like, let us know that. But if there's new things that they think we need to fund, we need to know that. If there's things they think we need to kick to the curb, we need to know that. That's reasonable. Because when the money comes out, we have done a good job getting caught up, and we want to stay that way. I'm going to jump down to old business, the learning management system update. If my memory is correct, which often it's not, at the last meeting, we discussed the concept of buying material from other vendors to put it on the state site. I did talk to one of the vendors about that concept, one of the more robust ones, and they said, yeah, they would probably be willing to sell the content. I said, well, if you sold the content, would you maintain it? And then it got kind of quiet. and I never did get a real clear answer on that, but what I perceived from that is if they sold the content to another vendor, then that content would then be that vendor's property, and they would be the one keeping it up. So I kind of walked away from that project. If somebody else wants to champion it as a committee, I would typically talk to them about and give them a list of people that we have. Of course, you've got the list, you were given the list of vendors you responded. Unless there's something else there, I'm gonna move on with that. The March pause, I'm gonna spend a few minutes with that if it's okay. I think I told y'all, I know that we talked about it last meeting, we were a little bit closer to getting something done today. We have a meeting set up February 1st and 2nd. Lake Blackshear, Georgia. We're going to start at 11:30 on the 1st. We working with Carol Crockett. Some of y'all know Carol, but Carol teaches for the military almost exclusively now. She teaches this class to the PJs, the folks at the 82nd Airborne. So she is going to come to the class. We have invited EMS providers. We invited hospital ERs. We have ER physicians, we have trauma surgeons. My administrator's coming. I don't know what I'm gonna be able to teach you, but that he come down and enjoy the day. He's very strong and a very good supporter of level 4 trauma center. So the goal here is for Carol to do the class for all of those people. Now, I think we're all aware that there's a whole bunch. We have some TECC instructors, we have some PHTLS instructors, we have some trauma nurse core curriculum instructors, folks on both sides, the pre-hospital and hospital, and trauma docs who teach and take some of these classes. I've got an ATLS instructor who's going to be online because he said he didn't want to compete from Houston, Texas. But we're going to do the class with the whole concept of everybody looking at the class and say, what will work in the civilian world, what won't. And if you've heard my story, I'm going to repeat it again. It's kind of dawned on me one day. I was talking to the ER manager in our hospital in the ER, and one of our crews came by with a stretcher. Didn't bow down his car, didn't say, hey, that just walked by. And I looked at Brooke and says, is that a stroke? She said, yeah. So a few minutes later, the paramedic came back with a handful of blood tubes. She and the nurse started putting the labels on the tubes. And about 5 or 10 minutes later, I don't know, they brought the patient back to the ER where they already had the neurologist on the screen looking at the CT scan and all that. And about 10 or 15 minutes later, they had the TPA started the way we would have addressed it. Very little communications. Very little. Everybody knew what they were supposed to do, and they did it. Patient who had a very bad stroke turned out very well. I don't see that, at least in rural Georgian trauma. We do a great job with STEMI. Same thing. You know, if we recognize a STEMI, we 12 pre-hospital, we come to our hospital, there's a capital. If they come to our hospital walk-in, and they come to chest pain, about 5 minutes they got EKG, it was a STEMI, and about 7 minutes out the phone to the cath lab. 10, 15 minutes are on the road. They sleep. I don't see that with trauma. Okay. In fact, it's the thing I see with trauma is get them the hell out of here. We don't like trauma. So the whole goal, at least from my perspective, and I'm gonna put this out in front of the group because I'm not a rocket scientist. Can we do the same thing with trauma? And trauma is different because it can be traumatic brain injury. Be the alien. It could be blunt force trauma. It could be all of those things. So it's going to be a little different. But if my medics know that he's got blunt force trauma, why wouldn't they start a blood cell? It might not save a whole lot of money. I mean, a whole lot of time, but it might save some. When they call it in, if they already got the blood there, wouldn't that make a difference? And here's my scenario on this one. I had a medic that, I may not believe this, but he didn't do what I told him to do. The And that had several discussions with this medic about trauma patients that they brought back to our ER. I told them, you know, here's a CDC scheme, this is what you're supposed to do. And then one day I was listening to the radio and trauma gunshot wound, 18-year-old kid was bringing to our ER. So I went over to the ER. And he said, Court, before you start, let me tell you why. He's an 18-year-old kid with 38 big special to his chest, pull the trigger. He said the kid's lung is full of blood. I know that. He said if I took him to Augusta, that's an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes. That other lung's gonna be full of blood. He's dead. They were in the ER out there, put in a chest tube. Long story short, a few minutes later, they put him on the same ambulance with the same medic, took him to Augusta. He's alive somewhere in Marion County today. My point is, if they had done CDC scheme and my protocol, the kid would have died. We got to figure out a way for the clinicians, the paramedics, to recognize that that situation of that uncontrollable airway that they've got, and bring them to a local ER that knows what to do. If it's gone.
You said that there, the ER.
Yeah, you're right.
And the other part now is rural EMS. Rural EMS, I mean, rural hospitals now. It's got PAs.
Okay.
Yeah, you got nurses. The first thing they said, it's a trauma, what'd you bring them here?
But we got to change that.
Yeah.
We got to change that. And this is not an EMS thing.
No.
This is a system thing that we're trying to do.
I don't know if it's a system. I think it's coming out from the hospital association. What? Telling these doctors or PAs, that you don't need to be treating these patients, put them in the road.
Hold on just a minute. Hold on just a minute. Where do they get that?
They get, when they go.
Look at the CDC scheme.
No.
Look at the CDC scheme that says if it's a critical trauma, take them to level 1, 2 center. If they're bleeding to death internally and they get there dry and they're dead, they're gonna stay dead. But if they can go to that rural center and get a couple of units of naked blood and get the hell out.
That's what I'm saying.
Again, that's why we got ER nurses and ER physicians that'll be at that meeting.
Probably got some medics say the same thing too. The other part of that too, you know, I've seen where, you know, we pick up blood at the hospital or start the blood and then fly them out. All that. But they say you got a pot full of nurses and a pot full of paramedics, not paramedics, PAs. I said, look, we don't want them here.
Well,
get their ass out.
And here's the deal. I don't want them there either. But just like,
but you made a point back
7 years ago, a STEMI come into our hospital would stay in our ER an hour and a half. Okay? Why was that? Because they didn't know anything. They didn't know anything. We trained them better. They knew exactly what to do with a chest pain. They monitor it. We look at the times. We look at the times they got the first EKG, the time it was diagnosed, the time they hit the time they telephone the lab, the cath lab, and the time they leave the. We look at that every.
Well, it sounds like there needs to be some type of protocol for trauma patients, for hospitals to do the same thing, but it is gonna have to involve the GHA, and we've always said that.
And here's the deal, the first meeting, and y'all, if you think it's, slap me. So this is first part. All right, then I hope we get a smaller group together and develop a curriculum to teach everybody this. The next step, while that's going on, either Lake Blackshear or Callaway or somewhere in South Georgia, because it's South Georgia money, it's put in there by a South Georgia guy or South Georgia. I want to get the CEOs, the ER managers, the ER physicians, all in a room together and have somebody talk about trauma data. How important it is for us to get the trauma data from the ERs and the small communities. I went to the trauma symposium in Atlanta, and it's there, and there was a guy talking, and I got to figure out who he was because I'm gonna try to get him to come. And he said the improvements in trauma care in the next 10 years will be pre-hospital. He said the trauma centers have got it pretty much rocking and rolling. We're gonna save lives now. It's gonna have to be pre-hospital changes. how many ambulance services in this state do you know who have a policy, we will have X number of ambulances in our county all the time? We won't make a transfer. If we got the last ambulance, we won't send it out. There's one. So now if it's me. in that
Whether it's written
ER,
or not is the question, but
If
you're right.
it's me in that, and part of them do it because they don't trust the nurses and they don't trust the physicians, okay? We've got to bring, there's a lot of things we got to change, but we've got to have a plan to change it. That's what I'm trying to do. If we can get one champion in every EMS and every ER to start working together and reviewing every case locally, just like we do the STEMIs, just like we do the strokes. We do that with every dang one of them in our hospital. We do that with every trauma in our hospital. We were in the middle of it Tuesday morning with DNV walked in at stop our meeting just that quick. But we reviewed every trauma case. I want to talk to Regina about ground level falls, about ground level falls. But that's what I would like to see us, the local hospitals reviewing their cases. We're not a stroke center, but we review every stroke. We're not a cath center, but we review every cardiac. And if we can get the rural hospitals to doing that, and the EMS and the hospitals holding each other accountable, we can save some lives in both of them. And then we'll probably have a few dollars left over. Another thing that I think we ought to be doing is giving EMSs or ERs blood warmers of some description. Because if you look at the triad of death and this kind of stuff, and trauma, one of the big points is hypothermia. So we take this guy, got a wreck, they took the HTLS, cut all his clothes off, so look at him, and then they don't cover him back up because they keep looking at him. We get into the ER, and they knock the blanket on him, they're not. And then they start cold blood on him, and he turns out bad. And the last part of it is, Carol says that's a 6-hour curriculum. So that's about 2 hours to train our people to start, not start, but to initiate a second unit. So that's going to be part of that core training. Once we get the curriculum done, then the goal is to do train-the-trainer courses. And when we start doing the train-the-trainer courses, and hopefully we will go statewide with that. Again, until we spend that $350,000 if we can salvage it, to invite anybody to come below the mat line. I think we can do that. Is trauma more difficult because it's not one organ? Stroke's one organ, cardiac's one organ, and trauma can be a bunch of organs. But there's some key points about what everybody needs, and that's what the March policy is all about.
So Courtney, Chad, are you still on the phone?
I am, but I've got to get off here. I've got a 12 o'clock, sorry.
Okay, I was just gonna say, your comment about blood and your comment about the presenter that made the comments of the things that are gonna save lives are gonna be pre-hospital care. Could we get an update sometime on what they're doing in Chad's region with their blood pilot? I mean, I generally know where it is because Chad and I chat every now and then, but I think that would be information that would be good for the especially for rural EMS, is their pilot seems to have been, I'm gonna say very successful. Chad may disagree with me, but it sounds like in talking to him, it's been very successful.
So
And Lee, you talking about the blood project? I lost you, cut out at first.
Yes.
Yeah, it has been. We just gave an update, Liz, last week, and we had a conference call with the state or scheduling ones. I think we've given right at 70 times, and there's been some very good success and saves, and we've had 0 negative reactions. What we're working with now is MSAC, and of course the state office will be working with them they will be working with them to try to get that, see how many more we need before they look at it as a scope of practice. But it has been very successful. It's just still trying to figure out cost and, what a pilot project involves.
And Lee, to your point, they've got enough people, they've got enough infrastructure, but if you go to rural Georgia and ask them about a chase car, supervisor's car, they don't have it, right? What I think we can do is if we can change the philosophy in the hospitals, so that if we call in and say, hey, we've got workforce trauma, it's cool and clammy, and here's your vital signs, your pulse, 140, capital refill times about a week and a half, and they roll, they don't, my doc, what I would like to see one day is that the nurse and doc walk out the ambulance, confirm what the medic said, hand them the blood, tell them to get the hell out of there. Can that be done? I don't know, that would change, that would take some rule changes at the state, because then the medic who probably could have started the blood step can now hang it out the blood.
It's in a little bit of intolerance too, so.
Well, you're right. You got maybe.
But if they do a medical screen, they have
That's
to
true.
do a screen.
Doctor walks in and says, hey, it's beyond our capability. And the receiving hospital, the trauma center's already said we're gonna take everyone. The only thing EMTALA really is an anti-discrimination law, anti-dumping law. So if we can get those agreements signed and done, then I think EMTALA goes away for that.
Can I make one other comment before Chad gets off? I don't know if this is Chad's last meeting or not, but I know he said he had to get off. And if it is his last meeting, I hope that he knows how well he's been appreciated for being on this group. Because his role is changing with what he's gonna be doing every day. You don't worry about the snow falling anymore.
In honor of Chad, although he's not
Oh,
here.
sorry.
No, you teed that up perfectly.
Okay.
We have a bulldog themed cake.
We'll enjoy.
Yes, we will. We always think of a reason for cake. but we
Oh,
love
I'm
chicken.
sorry. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I will let you know, first of all, Lee, thank you, and Liz, I hate I couldn't be there, but I have enjoyed being a part of this group, and I will still be available to help any way I can. We have a region council meeting tonight where I will end that, and then they will reappoint somebody in my place. So I will work with Scott to make sure we get somebody that works well with y'all. But I appreciate each and every one of you and keep doing the great job you do. And it's been an honor to serve on this committee.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you very much. So is any other questions about the March policy? And here's the deal, think about it, because I'm not a rocket scientist. My wife will tell you that in a heartbeat.
I thought you stayed at the Holiday Express last night.
I know, no, that was the week before last. If you think of things that might work, let us know. Because it's literally going to be interesting at that meeting in Lake Blackshill.
When's that meeting?
February 1st and 2nd.
So, well,
Well, they have to be invited.
that goes me.
Anyway, anything else in the way of old or new business? I would entertain a motion to go eat lunch.
Second.
Okay. She puts it here in front of the diabetic. Is that there or what?
Motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you all so much.
I heard Blake second that motion to adjourn.
So, we talked about fluid warmers in the past, and so even services that don't have the ability to do blood, I think that would be a huge step.
We approved that, so, because I got them on my